Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to By the Horns, Bitcoin podcast by South Africa. And this evening, we've got a different flavor on things. As you can see, now I'm joined by my loveliest guest thus far, Miss Flora Fontes, soon to be Allardyce. This is my fiancé. Spoiler.
Hello.
Flora, welcome. Good to have you. Welcome to our home.
Indeed. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. So I think the reason why we got you on the show tonight is to talk about the theme that applies to a lot of Bitcoiners, and that's who are their spouses? How do they deal with the incessant obsession that is Bitcoin, and what your experience has been around that, and maybe where it's taken you over the last few years that we've been together. And I mean, am I correct in saying that that I introduced you to Bitcoin, or had you heard about it before?
Yeah, essentially, because the first talk I actually heard properly about it was the Bitcoin 101 talk that you did at Rise many years ago.
Okay.
I'd heard of the blockchain. I was trying to think about this today. I was like, when did I first hear about cryptocurrency in general and the technology that goes behind it? And it was a friend started working for a tech company, and the company was a social impact tech company using the blockchain, and she tried to explain blockchain to me. And she's very similar to me. We both have worked we're people. We're not techie.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get my head around the fact that you could verify something digitally that happened in the real world at all. So it's been a journey since then. That was 4 years ago?
So you got 4 years ago. So you got introduced to blockchain, not Bitcoin first.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that was that post 2017, obviously 2018, 2019.
Yeah, it was 2018.
Late 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah. So has your view changed since then on what Bitcoin is and blockchain? Where do you stand on the issue now?
I mean, I think I definitely have a better understanding, which I think was inevitable living with you and also a lot of our friends, obviously. I mean, I suppose my stance hasn't changed. I suppose I've just learned more, and it's kind of developed my interest in it. But obviously it's interesting, as you say, as a spouse of a Bitcoiner, because, without being too obvious, there are more men in the tech space, and predominantly in things like blockchain and Bitcoin. But obviously most of them do have spouses. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if that's fact.
Called it.
I don't want to make assumptions. But
I mean, you're probably correct.
But a lot of them do. I mean, we've got a lot of friends.
Some of them, at least some of them.
Yeah, and therefore, I find it really interesting that there aren't as many women interested. And I think that the journey into Bitcoin is very different, or my experience has been that it's very different. And coming into it, I realized, the way a lot of content is presented, the way a lot of knowledge is shared, and the technical terms and stuff that are involved that you need to know about. Women seem to be less inclined to want to go and read up, when I speak to our Bitcoin friends who are male, they've all read the Bitcoin Standard. They all listen to Bitcoin podcasts all of the time. They're so immersed in it. And obviously my experience getting into it was very much through you talking about it and us just having conversations, which for me was a much gentler way to be introduced to the topic, and for me far more interesting than kind of having to dive in deep.
But so what is it about Bitcoin that grabs your attention now? Because am I correct in saying it's not the technology?
No, not at all. Not at all. I will be very honest in the fact that I'm I don't understand the tech properly at all. I will not be involved in coding Bitcoin in any way. But I love Bitcoin. I think especially the last year, I have fallen in love with Bitcoin. It's the more you learn, the more you're this is an amazing thing that's been created, and it's like nothing else we've experienced. And we joke about it being religion, and that people do go down that hole and they get they get very committed. But I understand why, because it is fascinating and it's brilliant. And so I don't know. I think it's just.
So what is it that captivates you about it?
Yes, what is it? So, I mean, as I say, you and I talked about it a lot. And for me, it's very much the philosophy of it. So I don't care about the tech side. I don't, because I'm like, it's just not going to be something that interests me really. I'm really glad it exists and that some people know what's going on and that they're doing the things.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of how I feel as well.
Yeah, it's like, keep doing what you're doing. I have no intention of getting involved there. But for me, it's very much the philosophy. And obviously, like, that is essentially how we live our lives, right? It's the freedom movement, is the decentralization. And I think once I understood that, the underpinning difference between, firstly, the fiat system and how that works and how centralized it is and how dangerous that is for the individual who is attached to that system, and how decentralization works for Bitcoin, but then also how other cryptocurrencies don't have that same factor. And like, for me, getting into it now, whenever I chat to people and they like, and they say like, oh, are you into cryptocurrency? Are you? And I'm like, yeah, Bitcoin. But they always just assume it's everything else crypto
but Bitcoin.
Yes. And I'm like, it's so different. I just believe so strongly that fundamental difference is so great that like, you almost I understand it's a cryptocurrency, but like, it shouldn't be lumped in with all of these centralized shitcoins.
It's because the shitcoins aren't really currencies. They're trying to do something else.
Yes.
They're not trying to be world money. I mean, they might say they are, but they're not succeeding.
Yeah.
And then those that aren't are trying to do something else, and that's a different problem to solve. And a problem which I don't think is, me personally, is as important as fixing global money.
Yeah.
And so running concurrently with you, like getting into Bitcoin, was like you were coming from the UK. Obviously, people haven't picked up your accent, being British, and the fact that in England everyone trusts the government.
I mean, not everyone, but
sure,
that's like the mainstream position is like the government's there to like help you.
Yes, hands off the NHS.
And we love the NHS.
Yeah,
it's a God-given gift. I know you feel differently.
Yeah. Anyway, so coming from that to South Africa and spending 4 years in South Africa now, and then has that shifted your politics? And that's kind of changed. That shift has happened kind of with Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the philosophy of Bitcoin ties so strongly to the kind of freedom movement, and I think it was probably inevitable. But the thing for me that's really, that I was surprised about, I think, was you obviously you grow up, and I think this, I wonder how often it actually happens. It's probably quite common. You grow up and you're like in one narrative, right? And you get fed all the information. Your family's position on things tend to be like, I mean, it might differ, but it's like pretty similar. And for me, learning about like Bitcoin and libertarianism and that side of things, it was like a light bulb. I was like, this makes so much sense to me. And
so walk us back a bit. So before you talk about libertarianism. So you weren't always a libertarian.
No,
like this has been a
like
progression.
Hard I was.
but no one explained to you what libertarianism was.
No,
right?
But I mean, I studied philosophy, so I knew it as a concept, but I didn't know it in a practical sense. That's the weird thing. It's like now when I look back, I'm like, I literally learned this stuff, but I learned it in a school, in the way that you learn in school, where you like read it and you memorize it and you write it back down and you're done. But well, that was my university experience. Just regurgitating. And so I think I hadn't fully thought through any of my ideas. I mean, I'm very happy to share that first time we met when you convinced me very quickly that Brexit is a terrible idea. Good idea.
Okay, but this is a good story. Maybe you should tell it.
Okay, so the first time Ricki and I had a proper conversation, like like we'd met briefly, but like proper conversation. We're just chatting, and Ricki obviously knows I'm British, and he's like, oh, like, what are your thoughts on Brexit? Like straight in there, we like not a lot of small talk, like, and I'm quite opinionated. So I was pretty sure of my position on things, and I'm like, no, Brexit's it's horrendous, and like these are the things it's ruining, blah blah blah. And Ricki's like, oh, so do you think that an unelected government in Europe knows more about what's best for you and your family than you do, and like more than people in Britain? And I'm like, I mean, I can't argue with that. No, obviously he doesn't know what my life's like. And Ricki basically unraveled me to the point where I had like no positions left. I was like, I think you gave me like one, and I really think it was just like a courtesy thing. You were like, I really don't want to piss off too much. But I was like, no, but it's good to have like the EU because then British students can go and study in Europe easily.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
1
I'm
point.
sure the European taxpayers are really stoked that they're paying for British students to come study there for free. It's great.
But yeah, and honestly, I think that was probably one of the like pivotal moments where I like realized how much of my positions had no theoretical basis and like no first principle, and obviously then started going into that.
Did you just admit on our show that you're a racist because you support Brexit now?
Maybe.
You got a Nigel Farage poster above your bed.
I don't. You do.
It's a bedspread. It's not a poster. It's a quilt.
It's also our bed, so
got a Nigel Farage quilt on the bed. Yeah. So, okay. So your politics has not changed slightly over time. And would you ever have thought if I'd have told you 3 years ago that you're going to be going to like freedom conferences and being on a Bitcoin podcast in 3 years' time? Would you have believed me? I feel like you back yourself.
I'm an open-minded person and I do back myself. So part of me would have been like, okay, interesting journey, interesting timeline. Let's see where that one goes. But yeah, I mean, I've loved it. Like, it's such an interesting journey to go on. And I think there's so much in understanding why you believe things, you know? And I think the more I speak to people, the more I realize that I'm like, oh, a lot of people haven't taken the time to like think through their positions on things. And they are me in that first conversation that we had about Brexit, where, you know, you can unravel them because they haven't based a lot of their arguments on sound reasoning, essentially.
Not everyone responds to that line of inquisition there. It was a high risk move on my part.
It paid off.
Did pay off. It was definitely a high risk move. But, you know, high risk, high reward. But so now your friends in the UK and most people you know in the UK, they don't think this way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wonder how many of them do. They just haven't been through the process, you know? Because, and I think that's where it is for a lot of people, is like people, yeah, they just haven't taken the time to think through their positions of like kind of officially, you know, with rigor.
But yeah, okay. So we're talking now about the concept of freedom and liberty, right? So like,
yes.
what was the pivotal movement for you? So I mean, what is the change that you've undergone?
Yeah, no, I mean, I really think COVID was 100% the like biggest trigger point for me. In terms of just seeing how people responded and then seeing how people just blindly listen to the person who's going to give them safety or what they perceive as safety and security, right? And in the UK, that's the government. Whereas in South Africa, it's not. It's the individuals and it's their families and the communities.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I loved being in South Africa for like lockdown and everything. I think I would have had a really different experience in the UK. I think because naturally that's not, I wouldn't have wanted to go down that route of just believing.
We also had a very good lockdown though. We
were quite lucky.
We're quite lucky. So
we did.
No, herbal tea time. That's Flora's tea alarm that goes off every night to make tea. As you can see, she's still on the wine though.
Dude, herbal tea time can wait today.
But so yeah, we got super lucky. We were down the coast, staying at my dad's place, and in the bush pretty much, and it was it was pretty good. But I mean, I say it was good. We had Karens living 2 houses down, 3 houses down from us, who were driving around the block, and like when I say we live in the bush, like we're in the bush, you know, like it's a tiny little village. And these Karens were driving around the block, and our friends who were trying to walk to the shop. This is in like week 3 of lockdown or something, of like hard lockdown, in March or early April. And they like were ratting them out to the cops because they were walking on the road. And like that's
2 people in the same household walking on the road outside.
Outrageous.
On a dirt road, no one around.
On a dirt road, outrageous. And this woman was driving in a bakkie with her partner.
Yes, same household.
Same household.
Masks on though.
Masks on, but they were in a bakkie, and everyone knows you can't get COVID in a bakkie.
Obviously not.
Yeah. So anyway, but I mean, seeing that level of ridiculousness, and then
Yeah.
I think that's when we both were like,
Yeah.
okay, this is a crock of shit. Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yeah.
the Karens that made us realize it was a crock of shit, but like what's happening to society was
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. And then it just escalated so aggressively. That's what I think has like baffled me, is just seeing how quickly it rolled out around the world and how quickly people were willing to give up like every freedom for safety, which I understand. Like I understand that balance, and everyone's got their position on the spectrum, right? And you know, I'm like, we have to respect that for everyone, but the best way to respect that for everyone is to give them total freedom, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Because if you don't, then you are making principled decisions that lead you to a dark place, you know? Because if you can, for example, vaccine passports or mandates, if you can mandate that someone else has to give up their bodily autonomy to you, obviously you're going to apply that across the board. It's not just going to stop at vaccines.
yeah.
You know, next thing it's like mandatory abortions.
Yeah.
You know,
but this is, I think, and this is the one of the turning points for me also, was realizing that it's very easy to say like, oh no, but that'll never happen. Like that's too extreme.
Yeah.
And you know, that was my position on almost everything
Yeah.
previously. And then through COVID, you just see how actually, if you give an inch, they'll take an inch,
and
they'll keep taking.
Yeah.
And so, and you know, you can say now that's a ridiculous, you know, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
But it has happened. And that's the other thing, is like people make comparisons to examples in history, right? Like the obvious one is fascism in Germany. And again, people will like, you know, smirk if you bring it up as a comparison, because they're like, oh no, but that was so extreme. That was like a completely, you know, outsider situation. I'm like, that's not the anomaly. That's the norm. That's where this will go if we keep going down that road. And
that is the norm. That's exactly right. For human history, like we've lived as absolute savages for like tens of thousands of years. And like our brief period of what we perceive to be civilization, where we're not genociding each other, is like 70 years since the Second World War. And like genocides have happened in between that as well still. So it's not like, you know, humans should have like a counter like 15 days genocide free, you know? Like it's like you say, it's the norm.
yeah.
And you don't only have to look further, like no further than Australia, to be like, what happens when a nanny state becomes like an authoritarian nanny state? Yeah. So anyway, gets very dark very, very quickly. But like, do you feel that now, having been red pilled and like looking at things from a freedom orientated aspect, like it's much clearer for you to be able to
I think you can make decisions.
Operates?
Yes. I think it gives you a much clearer picture of, but also how to navigate it. Because I think it's actually, and again, like I think we've seen this over the last 2 years with COVID, is like people are really confused and really uncertain. And I think often it's because they don't know, like none of us really know what's going on, right? No. Really. And so I think it's that like, it's that uncertainty, and you can try and educate yourself. Don't get me wrong. Like I know, you know, like we do, lots of our friends do, etc. But how do you even know what you're consuming is also the case, right? Is also true. And so it gets to a point where I'm just like, if you can live your life by a certain set of values that govern all the decisions that you make, that can keep you as safe as possible, but give you the most freedom and control over your own life, then for me, I'm like, it's almost works like a formula that you can then navigate, as opposed to having to like cherry pick what's happening around you and make decisions
without a set of rules that like the guiding principles. Everything is responding just to that specific situation.
Yes, yeah.
And whatever narratives surround it at that point in time.
And the thing that's also mad is like you go down this route, right? And then you start seeing how many people were aware of this for like years. Yeah. Years and years and years. Like people have figured this out for so long,
like
and been talking about it. And still it gets veered off course so regularly. But I think it's because when your society just becomes complacent after you've had enough good times. I mean, it's literally that narrative of like, good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. And I just hope we're going into the strong men create good times again. We're going to pivot back.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. But I mean, this is something that I look around, and this is why I'm so thankful for Bitcoin, because I came to the concept of liberty and freedom kind of same time as Bitcoin as well, but like maybe a little bit earlier, maybe like 6 months earlier. And that's all well and good because, like, you know, you and I mix in the circles of people who are like freedom maximalists in South Africa, and like it's great that they've got the philosophical underpinning and they, you know, are coming up with solutions. But the biggest thing is the money for me personally, because if someone can control the money printer, then they can undermine whatever you're doing, because they can just cheat you out of any energy you've got stored. And obviously, like, I bang on about this every day. Like, we'll be cooking dinner and I'll be like, fucking central banks running everything. But I mean, it's a
but you're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's and this is why Bitcoin gives me hope, is essentially what it comes down to. Because if we didn't have Bitcoin, I'd be looking at the world today and be like, oh, we are fucked. The thing is, if Bitcoin's a psyop, then we are fucked. But I mean,
that's a timeline.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope it's not.
I mean, my natural disposition is very much positivity, so I don't think it's going that way. I think it's too smart. I think it's too well designed, and the way that it's been developed so consistently plays out to the set of rules that were initially put together, right? Like all of it. So even, you know, if you're wanting to change it, etc., the fact that you need 95% of the network on board, etc. Like,
yeah. So I mean, so what you're talking now about is like consensus, right? So if we're trying to propagate a set of rules across Bitcoin and someone tries to change those rules, 95% have to agree to change those rules. And that's like democracy in, you know, that's like, you've got an intolerant minority that can stop things. And that's essentially what individualism is about. Like, you don't get to vote away my rights. Essentially, you know, and it's congruent with that.
But that's why. So, what is the argument for the fact that it could have been, like, Bitcoin could be
a psyop?
Yeah, a psyop.
Well, it was Satoshi Nakamoto was the CIA, hypothetically, or something like that. And they've developed Bitcoin because they know the world economy is going to crash and they need to be able to transition to a new sound money standard. But that doesn't hold water to me, because if anyone's going to create a system to be like lifeboat onto, they'd want to be able to game it in some way. And because you have to mine Bitcoin, it's proof of work. Like, you're going to trend towards like an even distribution of coins as hash power distributes around the world based on energy.
So, and also, you're just creating bigger network effect.
You're reducing your own power that you will have.
Exactly. So then I'm like, how?
I mean, so the assurance is because Bitcoin's open source, right? So anyone can go and write the code or contribute to the code. And inspectors, you've got all these different sets of eyes looking at the code, contributing to it. So if it was a psyop, it's a very good one. And it's people kind of deserve to be screwed over then, because we tried hard not to be.
How much of a breakdown will you have if you find out that Satoshi is actually the government?
Yeah, it won't be good.
It won't be good.
It won't be a good day.
Please let that timeline not be the case.
No, definitely, because then my life would be alive for the last 5 years. Longer. So but I mean, I wager that maybe we're on the right path here. We'll be okay.
I think so.
But so, are there any things about Bitcoin still that, like, you don't quite get, or like where you see issues or holes?
I'm sure there are.
Okay, but put it this way: when you go and speak to like your friends and family about Bitcoin now, because people now ask you about Bitcoin. What are the common arguments that you come up against?
So this was a really interesting thing that happened, because there was a turning point for me, right, where initially I was just learning about Bitcoin, and then you absorb enough information that you actually become like relatively knowledgeable to people who don't know anything about it, right? And so I would find myself in conversations where I still felt like I didn't know Bitcoin that well, but I'd be having conversations with people who are saying things that I'm like, oh, no, like that's like completely inaccurate, or like
that's incorrect.
Wrong. I'm sorry. That is the case.
Shut your mouth, no coiner.
I think that was probably when I realized that, like, I love Bitcoin and I'm actually very involved and would consider myself a Bitcoiner.
When you're telling like a 45-year-old man that he's fucking wrong about
he's
Bitcoin.
Wrong, yeah. But you know what?
How do they handle that?
No, but so this is also what I find really interesting, because the people. some people really surprise you in how close-minded they are to it, and some people really surprise you, like
about how open-minded they are.
How open-minded they are. I had dinner with some friends recently, older, like family friends, older couple, and I started talking to him about it, and he just went like he was like a sponge. He just was like, oh my goodness. He was like, this is and he knew about it. He understood it's interesting. He understood the technicalities of Bitcoin, but he didn't understand the philosophy. So then we were just talking about the philosophy, which is the bit that I love. And he was like, he was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And I kind of, previously would have thought that he would be someone I would expect that would just not be interested or would be like quite close-minded to it. And so, yeah. And I mean, working with Bitvice, right? You get people who you get, women in their 60s, 70s?
Yeah.
That are like fully on the ball, fully committed.
Totally.
And I'm like, I love it. You wouldn't expect it, but they're there and they're keen.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so, I mean,
so in that specific discussion where you were talking to this guy, like the philosophical sides around it, like what is the main point that really sticks or something like that? Is it in South Africa? I found it's people are really worried about the government debasing the money.
Yeah,
like that's coming through more and more.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting, right? Because I had a conversation with someone else recently, and they were saying, how you can have $50,000 in your bank account, and this is exactly the phrasing, that is still going to be worth that because of the regulation that's been put in place by the by the British government.
Completely incorrect though.
And this is the thing. And so, and I'm sitting there thinking like, I mean, I haven't studied economics, nothing like that, but I'm like, but I understand, I've seen what's happened to like Zimbabwe as like a very prime example, close by example. But I'm like, they also thought that at some stage, right? At what point do you, and people think that they're going to have time to realize that their currency is like hyperinflating and that they're losing everything. But of course you don't.
Yeah.
Like some people will obviously be on the front of the wave and will realize, but like a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like that. Yeah, I suppose it comes back to like that belief that the government has your back and that they wouldn't let you lose your life savings.
Lol.
And they would. And they will. Like it's not the last time it's happened, like it'll happen again.
And is that because you've been living in South Africa that you realize the government does not got your back? Because did you think the government had your back when you still lived in the UK?
Yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, I think it was really COVID that made me question. I think it just made me think everyone is a person at the end of the day. And why do we think that these like elected, but to an extent, elected officials have like your individual best interest at heart? Like they don't. They have their individual best interest at heart.
Yeah, it's a very childish belief.
It's not a bad thing in terms of like, I'm sitting here as someone who believes in freedom and individualism, and I'm like, I think I should have my best interest at heart because my main...
own personal best interest.
Yeah, my own personal. Yeah. So like Boris sitting there, he doesn't have the public's best interest. He's got his best interest at heart. So if he's being offered money for something, or he's being told to promote something and therefore will get this other in return, for me now, I'm like, why wouldn't you do that? I understand that like we all have choices to make and not everyone is good and not everyone is evil either. But like people again, fall on that spectrum somewhere down that line.
Where do you feel Meghan Markle falls?
No, we're not getting into the royals in general. I'm
is that off limits? But she's not a royal though.
I mean, you're right, she's not. She never will be again. I think we can leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so obviously people are going to abuse their power. Government officials are going to abuse their power,
and some people won't, which is amazing. But you need to sit with the you need to come at it from the position that they probably will, so that you can prepare for a worst case scenario, essentially.
Yeah.
In the same way that like we save our money, right? We when you start earning enough money to save, people tell you save a rainy day fund. It's for an emergency. Like you want some sort of security in your life. And so.
But why do you need a rainy day fund if the government can just cut you a check when things go bad?
No, but I mean, your rainy day fund could be in Bitcoin, right?
No, but I mean, like, why do you need to worry about saving for the future if the government can just be there
I see.
to bail you out?
I see. Yeah, well, I mean, not trusting that as a process. What kind of mad process is that?
But people do, right? I mean, like,
do.
this is the doll system. Like, people, I mean, the US, I don't know about the UK, but in the US, they handed out their stimmy checks. I'm pretty sure they did in the UK as well, probably.
Oh, what for
COVID?
Yeah,
COVID relief.
yeah.
So they were just sending money. Where'd that money come from?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, okay, so if you're on furlough, most people were being paid 75% of their salary. 75%.
Yeah.
On furlough, and their companies weren't making money because their companies were all closed down during COVID. So, like, yeah, where does that money come from?
Control P.
And the thing is, like, don't get me wrong, it is amazing because you don't want everyone to suddenly starve or like literally not be able to pay for anything. But also, I'm like, there's unintended consequences to all these actions, and I just think it's so important to be aware of that, right? Regardless of what you do with the information, just be aware that there, it's not a perfect system.
And there's not a money tree.
Yeah, and that's what I think. Like, I mean, when you talk to people about Bitcoin, right, the arguments that come up against it, it's like they're trying to make Bitcoin perfect. They're like, I won't get into this until Bitcoin is a perfect system. But I'm like, but you're already in an imperfect system. Bitcoin is a better system.
Yeah.
And fine, it's not perfect. But the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, I think, is that because of how the network is created and how the code is open source and anyone can work on it, it will only improve.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it literally can't be made worse.
I mean, through inaction, potentially, if nothing happens, people could argue that. But I mean, there's a lot of case we made for that. In your money, you want to have as little change as possible because stable money is good money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the argument for Bitcoin, right? Whereas the rules of fiat money can get changed.
Yeah.
Like they change interest rates all the time. That's changing the rules of fiat money.
Yeah.
And if they put it into a CBDC that goes to a digital wallet in your phone that is now linked to a social credit score, like that's going to change your money all the time. Like you can't forward plan.
Yeah.
Like what does that do to society? What does that do to civilization if we can't plan 5 years in advance?
Yeah.
Because the value of our money is just ethereal. It's not good.
No, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's not
good. Because you wasted a lot of time.
Yeah, well, that's essentially what it is, right? Because your stored money is basically your stored energy and your stored time.
Yeah. But this is, I mean, again, like, I understand that it's like, it's very deep to get to that point. But like, you kind of do need to be at that level to understand your money, right? Is like, I think people stop at that level of being like I do a job and this is the cash that I get as a result of it. And obviously, like, I understand because that's been the system for so long. But I'm like, once you understand that it's not just like a cash reward, that it's literally, that's your physical store of the time that you put in and the energy that you put in, which you can never get back.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, that for me, it's literally the most valuable thing that you have. And so if it's something that can be manipulated by other people, like, I think that, I mean, I'd rather it wasn't.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, cool, I believe in Bitcoin, because even if it like fails horrendously, I'm like, the principle of what they were trying to achieve and what they're trying to do, I'm like, I believe in that they're trying to, give you like the best store of value for your time. And
if it doesn't work, V2 will pop up with the learnings from Bitcoin, right? Like the Pandora's box is open.
Yeah. So then this was the other thing, right? With going on this journey was the objections that you have internally, right? Because you have the first layer, which I would say is stuff like, people say like, it's too volatile, uses too much energy, like all the things that once you get into Bitcoin, then you're like, this is actually irrelevant. Like, it's fine that it's volatile now. Like, all the I'm like, if you're thinking long-term, these things are different, are not irrelevant, but it's fine. Yeah. I'm fine with it. I'm like, I've come to terms with these things. And on the energy one, I just think like, people are so innovative. They're creating ways to solve that problem. Anyway, so again, not irrelevant, but like, I'm not gonna, But then there's the next layer, right? Which is like, if you're putting all of your investments and savings into Bitcoin, say, you're not going the diversifying your portfolio route and you just like, I believe in Bitcoin, I'm in.
Yeah.
And you're putting all of your money there. What are the scenarios where it could fail? And I think that was another big turning point for me was when I realized how extreme the scenarios that would need to occur are in order for it to fail. So like I remember we had a conversation a while ago about okay, so like if all the governments banned it and how difficult that would actually be, and the fact that like there would always be another government who would see that like all the capital's about to drain out of a country and that they could, all they need to do is turn around and be like, we welcome Bitcoin, and they would get the entire network of Bitcoin to their country. Like that's too, why would they? And I mean, look, governments cannot agree on anything. So like why on earth would they all manage to suddenly agree on this one thing? And then you've got El Salvador out there doing the things that I'm like
well, that's what El Salvador is, just they breaking free from the cabal early. They like out of the system because quite frankly they got nothing to lose. They're a dollarized country, one of the poorest countries on earth. People are literally leaving their country because there's so much crime. People like fleeing on foot. So El Salvador's like, cool, Bitcoin, let's go.
But you know what is interesting? You're right. It is because they have nothing to lose. They're a small enough country where they can they could do it, and I suppose that is what you need as the catalyst, is to just be like, because for example, like the US couldn't just switch to Bitcoin.
No.
Like it's just too, I mean, everything would fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, it's the world's financial capital. Like Bitcoin, if they did that, Bitcoin would go to like $2 million overnight. It would be surreal. But I mean, one day they will. But the incentive and the costs line up such the smallest countries will do it first. So like you're probably not going to see the next country being like a G20 country. It'll still be like a very poor country, But ultimately, like it's you see wherever Bitcoin is being adopted, like freedom thrives as well. So Bitcoin's a Trojan horse for freedom. So for me personally, with the madness that's going on in the world, I like the fact that El Salvador is like, hey, Bitcoiners, you guys can come here, no capital gains tax, no property taxes, none of that. Come buy residence. And I'm like, okay, cool, I got a lifeboat now.
Yes.
Because some countries like Australia and New Zealand are off the cards. Like they can't go there anymore. So El Salvador, cool. That's nice to have. And more countries are going to follow. Like maybe Paraguay next, or Tonga. Well, Tonga almost blew up the other day, but they're still around. But yeah, I mean, so it's going to be interesting. But just to go back to the attack vectors you're talking about there. So they'd all have to conspire at the same time. And that still wouldn't kill it. Because how do you kill the network, And I suppose once you realize that, you're like, well, that's a lot more resilient than the rand.
Right, exactly. That's right. And then people are trying to argue it as if it's a reason to not go over, and I'm like, okay, but like way less would need to happen to your current system in order for it to fail. Way less. And so I'm like, you can criticize this like much stronger system, or you can keep going down the route of what you're currently in, which is fine. I understand why people, it is all the security. I understand why people aren't going to just completely jump ship.
Well, they haven't unplugged from the Matrix yet.
They also that. But then the other one was and I think maybe this is a more realistic situation that could happen, is I'm like, what if something better comes along? Right? And then
what if a better cryptocurrency comes along?
Yes. But then as the same, you've got the perfect example already upon us, in that like Bitcoin is a better version of a currency system, right? And look how long it's taking to move over to it. So like the time it would take for everyone to move to a new system that was better, you would have time to move. And so then that also relaxed me, because I was like, it's true. It's not like you're going to wake up one day and suddenly this like way better version of how to store your value exists. And if it does, I wouldn't trust it.
I mean, do it as a thought experiment. Is Bitcoin a better store of value and a better medium of exchange than the Zimbabwean dollar? Like, yes. And like people still use the Zimbabwean dollar. Like that move across to Bitcoin. Otherwise, everyone would be using Bitcoin. But like these like ideas of inertia and momentum and like there's gravity around them, and people.
And it's actually mad to see it, right? When you realize how much, like, if you can get weight behind something. I mean, like the last 2 years with COVID as well. You put weight behind one idea, one thing, and you just watch it go. It takes off.
Something as ridiculous as a cloth mask. Like that we got some weight behind it, and people believe that I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't believe that hard because the real diehards were wearing 2 masks.
Yes.
So they couldn't
So
have
they
believed it that
kinda
hard.
knew.
Actually, they were
Yeah.
not such firm believers.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
now it's like, how crazy is this as well? Like, we just seen the narrative crumble around us, around all of these COVID
Yeah.
things. Cloth masks, obviously, now
Yeah.
everyone's like, we never believed that. Cloth masks obviously never worked.
Mm.
Meanwhile, 3 weeks ago, people were like, you wear your mask.
Yeah.
So like the mainstream media turns, and then and people's opinions then change because they're told that their opinion can change. It is now socially acceptable for that
Yes.
to happen.
But that's a big thing, right? It's the socially acceptable side of it.
Mm.
And I think that's it's just been so hectic over the last the last year particularly, I suppose.
Yeah.
That if you don't follow the narrative, then you're killing your grandma, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, true. You know what is killing your grandma is putting sick grandmas back into the nursing home with grandma. That kills grandma. And the politicians who are telling us to wear masks are doing that. So I struggle to empathize with the politician's position on what I should do.
I know you do. I know.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few years.
Yeah.
But every country's printed so much money.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the US has printed 40%. South Africa's only
Yeah.
printed like same as US, probably about 40%. The problem is we don't have the demand for the rands like the US dollar has.
Yes.
I mean,
so you can't saturate it in the same way.
yeah, you can't, because the scam can't run as far.
Yeah.
But so for South Africans, then like,
Yeah.
this is where Bitcoin becomes a unique,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it was actually that. So when we went to that conference recently, and we were talking about the essentially like how inflation. Oh, sorry. How if you're standing next to the money printer, you don't feel the inflation.
If you're the first one to spend the freshly printed money.
Yes. Then you don't feel it, and the people that then suffer are people at the very bottom.
Yes, people get the money lost.
As a society, generally speaking, we are all about bringing up the underdog, right?
Allegedly.
It's right, allegedly, right? That is supposedly the narrative. And yet here we are completely fucking them, essentially. And yeah, and I'm like, you can't do that with Bitcoin.
You can't do that with Bitcoin.
Like, you can't. The individual, every single individual is essentially equal in the network.
Yes, yeah. And the only way to contribute, if you want to bring new Bitcoins, you got to do work.
Yeah.
So it's honest.
Yeah.
It's fair.
Yeah.
And that's how I know the South African government will never get a handle on it.
Yeah.
Because they never have been, you know, not ever. Like, go way as far back as you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can't cheat the system.
Yeah.
And that's why politicians don't like it. But we're going to see this imperative now. And I think the pendulum is swinging back, where we've had so much centralization, and we're going to get pushback against centralization now, because people are waking up to the fact very quickly that, we've been lied to in a dramatic fashion for the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and things are really bad. And they've been lying, you know, about pretty much everything, and ruined our lives. And the decentralization push is going to be big, because like, if we can't trust them on healthcare, and we can't trust them on basic stats and numbers, which they've been fudging for the whole time, how can we trust them with our money? And you can't. The answer is you can't. So it's like,
no, I do think there's going to be a big fallout.
Yeah.
And it's interesting though, because, you know, I was having a conversation with another friend recently, and I said something, you know, I was like, there's going to be, I was like, something big there's going to be some sort of reaction to this. And he's like, no, like, you know, it's all keyboard warriors. Like, I really don't think that it's going to, like, you know, it's not that big. People aren't actually as, you know, as angry or as against the kind of, the way that things have been going, as they say. And I mean, I don't know, hey? I think
it will be until it isn't.
I think they are.
It's going to kick off somewhere.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, you weren't here. You were back over in the UK. But when July kicked off in Durban, the Durban July, the riots kicked off.
Yeah.
That happened quickly.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
a couple of days of like some Zuma protests, and then it just went to like a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And for 3 days it was.
But I wonder though. So like, we're seeing the narrative turn now, right? And I wonder if it's happened at exactly the right time.
Well, this is the thing.
Yeah.
What pressure caused the narrative to turn now?
Yeah, because it turned, and it turned really quickly within like a week.
Okay, so the optimist in me is like, I think it was Omicron where they were like,
was too weak.
this is going to be horrific. It's going to kill everyone.
Yeah.
Remember when the White House released that statement about like
You're
unvaccinated
going to die over
people
Christmas.
are going to die over Christmas and clog up the hospitals with their unvaccinated bodies, or like something to that effect. It was like the most horrific statement I've ever seen come out of a statesman ever.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, fucking Brandon. So horrific. And then Omicron was like weak ass, so weak.
But this is also interesting, right? Because we were here when Omicron hit.
Yes.
And everyone got it. All our friends, everyone. I got it.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the UK, and I was saying like, no, this variant's like mild, and it wasn't yet in the narrative.
Yes.
So people were like, no, like, and then it was only towards the end of my stay when people were like, oh no, actually, like, turns out Omicron is chilled,
Yes.
But it takes that long, I suppose, for it to get for the news to get everywhere.
So it might be, and this is the optimist, that the news was like, it's going to be so bad, and they obviously were pushing the fear porn. They were like, Omicron's going to cross with Delta, and you're going to get DeltaCon, and like, it was fucking ridiculous. And then the lie was just so blatantly obvious, and then the vaccine stopped working to prevent people from catching COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, initially when this came out, and like they gaslight us about this all the time, they're like, oh no, the vaccine's never meant to stop transmission. Bro, when the vaccines first came out, they were prevents transmission, 95% effective. Then the narrative flipped to prevents hospitalization and death, right? Now
reduces your symptoms.
Yeah, reduces your symptoms. Now Omicron comes around. Everyone who's double vax plus booster, plus even double boosted, are all getting Omicron. So like vaccine effectiveness or efficacy is like below 50%. It's like basically it doesn't work. So it's basically become a therapeutic. So that narrative has just flipped so much that maybe they are like, we can't keep pushing this because it's not having the same effect anymore. Whoever's polling people.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that American politics is the epicenter of all of this. Because like Biden's approval rating is 33%. It's like the
surprised it's not 1%.
It's horrific. The gap between I mean that's the official Democrat numbers, right?
Yes.
So it's probably way
so I'm sure it's lower.
So like the gap between Republicans and Democrats hasn't been bigger in like 30 years. Republicans got the biggest lead they had in 30 years. Like they're going to absolutely win the midterms. It's going to change things big time. So the Democratic Party and the machine that is the Democratic Party that drives all these narratives has to kind of adjust course now. So maybe that's it. That's the optimist in me. But then the pessimist is like, this goes way deeper than the fucking Democratic Party. Like the same shareholders who control Pfizer, BlackRock, etc., Vanguard, who control Pfizer, control Tesla, control the banks, have like a stake in everything, controlling stake in everything. And like, they don't give a shit about like who's going to be the president of the Democratic Party or not. Like, I mean, I suppose they do because, they're the kingmakers there, but like, I don't know, maybe they have to worry about the peasants getting angry and coming with pitchforks as well.
Yeah. But I mean, as you say, when it kicks off quickly. Yeah. And if this is the reaction to basically being like, oh, we're taking this too far, people are getting angry because you saw there was it was like not only in the news, but also like all of my friends started like, who previously hadn't been questioning the narrative. Everyone, you're sitting there at dinner with someone who's like, I was double vaccinated and then I got Omicron and I got it really badly. I got it for 10 days. I was sick. And they're annoyed about it. They're like, I was told if I got the vaccine, then I could travel, then I could do this, then I could do that. I wouldn't get COVID, all of these. My symptoms would be reduced and then they're not.
I was told if Novak Djokovic was fucking extradited, I wouldn't get Omicron, and here I am.
Here I am with my Omicron.
Fuck. Yeah.
It's wild. It's wild out there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then I'm thinking like, okay, is that the people are just like, okay, or the politicians at least are like, this is getting too dangerous now. It is going to kick off. We've got to switch now. And maybe they just did it in the nick of time.
Yeah, I think definitely in South Africa, the Durban July changed everything because the ANC doesn't walk around with the same level of arrogance and swagger that they used to before then.
Do you reckon? I feel like they always knew that like if shit hit the fan, then they couldn't really do anything.
No, they might have known that, but everyone else didn't know that.
Now everyone knows exactly. That's the difference.
So everyone knows the government can't do shit. when it kicks off, the army is going to arrive there 3 weeks later, and they're not going to have food.
Yeah.
You know, like the police are going to roll up, and a day later there's not going to be bullets.
Mm.
So they can't really piss everyone off too much, because they won't be able to stop, you know, the fire that gets started, and then no one wants that.
Yeah.
So I think the ANC kind of just softened up after that, and they were like, okay, we can't really keep pushing this narrative. But simultaneously, they're getting that sweet Gates Foundation money. Cyril Ramaphosa made a tweet yesterday, the day before, thanking the Gates Foundation and like WF and all that shit. So like, obviously they're getting funding from these guys who I think are driving this narrative. So, but they've got internal political pressures they've got to balance.
But also, I think like Cyril's a small pin for
of course,
the big players, right? So maybe he's hoping he can like scuttle around underneath, appease the public, and keep taking the funding.
Well, look, if the ANC is good at anything, it's taking people's money. So I back Cyril to broker that deal. He'll take Gates's money, no problem. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see what happens there. But then here we are talking about South Africa going to shit and like dry ice breaking out. Like, why are you here though, and not in the UK where it's safe?
No, I love South Africa. I love Cape Town. You know that. But I mean, this is the thing. Like, you do have more freedom here. Like, it is the case. I mean, people make a plan for themselves. Like, I mean, you know, I work in entrepreneurship. You see that, like, the rates of I mean, I work in female entrepreneurship, so, but like the rates of women starting businesses in South Africa is awesome. Like people, it's a thing because people have to problem solve here.
Is that because South African men are lazy?
Absolutely, it is. All of them.
Yes.
That's a vast generalization. No, but you know, they're solving problems that you don't have in the UK. For example, like, you know, you've got loads of people starting like social impact businesses,
private security companies,
exactly. And you know what, people are doing it in the UK, but they're doing it to a lesser degree and in a different way, because they're not doing it out of such a desperate need, you know. And I mean, what you can argue if that's good or bad either way, I suppose, because
it's what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love that energy. I love that, like, you are supposed to be self-reliant. Like, you are the only one who's responsible for your own life. And, you know,
and to
look after it.
Circle back to the NHS, right? So, like, because in the UK and in Australia, they make the argument that people who, it comes back to the vaccine again, but like, if you don't get vaccinated and you get sick, can be a strain on the healthcare system, and therefore they can justify mandatory vaccinations because you're going to be a strain in the healthcare system, which is socialized. In South Africa, they can't say that because, like, bro, I'm going to private healthcare that I pay my insurance for. Fuck off, you know, like, they tell me that. And this is where, like, the government, where it becomes apparent to you and gives you this what they would be like, is it called a privilege or not a privilege, but entitlement. They can give with one hand and take away with the other, because they can now be like, or drive out all other healthcare providers, essentially by undercutting them, and then by law, and then take away your options, and then start forcing you because you've given up your right to choose your own healthcare provider. And like you said, like, that's the freedom we have in South Africa, which is through incompetence, I think, of the government, that we've got this vast freedom, and they don't have that much control over us. Sure, they do. Like, they closed the beaches last December. Like, ridiculous. I still went surfing though. So.
And that's the thing, is like, people still made a plan, right? On the beaches where, you know, not the beaches in Cape Town, but like the beaches outside of Cape Town, you can bet people on the beaches. Like,
we went straight by. No one was. No one was
people
stopping
were
us.
on the beaches.
Exactly.
I can tell you that much. But it's the same, like, I was we were talking about it with our American friends the other day, like, when they banned alcohol, it was like, we never went a day without alcohol. Like, you can make a plan, because people are like, they use their brain, you know, they're like, this rule is for, you know, a specific reason that doesn't relate to every single person in the country. Therefore, like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep running my business.
I also think it's people's ethical duty to disobey unjust laws.
Yeah.
Like, you can't buy cooked chicken. Well, that's during the first lockdown. What the hell kind of law is that? Like, I'm going to call someone and be like, please cook me a chicken. I'm going to come buy it from you. Just to like flout the law. It's fucking ridiculous. But you can't do that in the UK. You can't. Well, maybe in the UK, but you can't do it in Australia. They'll track you. They got the chicken cooking tracking app. They got you. They got an app for everything there. A tracking app for literally anything.
Yeah.
So I mean,
this is the thing though. If you trust the government, you think that they're making rules that are there for a reason, and the thing is, often they are, right? You can justify it, even with like, so for example, even when they banned alcohol here, and they were saying, it's so that like less people are going to hospital as a result, so there was less people in the hospital. That was like supposedly
that was the reason. Yeah,
the reasoning.
Allegedly, yeah.
And well, I mean, I haven't looked into this, but like apparently it worked, right?
Yeah.
That it did reduce the number of people in hospital. Yeah. So I'm like, you can justify all of the rules that they make. Doesn't mean that it's relevant for everyone.
That doesn't mean they have the right to do that. Like the government doesn't have the right to tell me what to put in my body. Yeah.
Okay, but obviously the age-old argument comes down to like, but if you're impacting someone else, then can they?
If I get drunk and do a car accident, then prosecute me. But if I have a drink at home and I don't drive over anyone, why must I? No, I'm guilty until proven innocent. Otherwise,
Yeah.
Which is no way to run a.
But they're trying to stop that first point, right? Which I completely agree.
No, like they're trying to get the thin end of the wedge in, so that they can then take over the rest of your life.
Yes.
Which is what they did, right?
Yeah.
Like, they just made outrageous regulations.
Yeah.
And now South Africa's opened up, UK has opened up. Yesterday, Boris Johnson like scrapped all the COVID mandates, essentially all of them, except the NHS healthcare workers vaccine mandate. But we'll see if that gets scrapped or not. But masks are gone, everything. South Africa will probably follow that pretty soon. But other countries, Austria, France, Germany, UK, not UK, Australia, New Zealand, gone full retard. They're just like doubling down on their rules.
Okay, but now I'm proud to be British.
Yes.
Because they have changed their tune significantly in the last few days.
Okay, but Boris Johnson. Let's hear it. What do you think about Boris?
I don't know if you can pin it all on Boris.
No,
I think
definitely
there's like
not.
so much going on that like I don't know if at this point I would back any politicians really, other than the senator of Florida.
They're the governor of Florida.
The governor of Florida.
Ron DeSantis. He's the man.
But like, no, like there's a few fun players, but like, I think generally speaking, I mean, no, I don't have an opinion on Boris. Actually, I haven't followed specifically what he is doing well enough to know whether or not.
Fair.
Yeah.
I suppose you don't live there anymore, so it
yeah,
doesn't really impact you that much.
Well, I mean, it does. Yeah. All my friends and family there. I should probably be aware. But this is what I mean. I'm like, it's the government really in general, right, who are deciding the policies and the health minister. But
I mean, the Tories are in power. They're the conservatives. They're the guys who are supposed to be pro-freedom, pro-liberty, and they just were not
From that position, I'm like, no. But what I mean is, like, I don't know if it's Boris or if it's, like, the government.
But Boris was sold. He sold himself as his package. He used to call himself, like, a libertarian.
Yes.
The fuck is he a libertarian?
Yeah. Or no, he is. He's just had to, like, squash all of his principles, right? Because he's, he's either being paid or he's being blackmailed.
Yeah. Look, he wouldn't be the first libertarian to sacrifice his principles during COVID.
Fair.
There's been a lot of those. Yeah. I actually had breakfast with Russell Lamberti this morning. We were talking about exactly this. Yeah. About like how there's been so many fair weather libertarians who are like, when times are good, they're like, oh yeah, freedom, individualism. And then as soon as COVID hits and they got a spicy cough, they like abandon all their principles. And they were like,
spicy cough.
Govern me harder, Like we've seen it in South Africa, we've seen it in the UK, and then unlikely candidates have come out of the woodwork to be pro freedom. Yeah. Like you shared that guy on Instagram, who's just like a random British guy who like
from Bournemouth.
Yeah, from Bournemouth to grow up in a council house, and he's like pro freedom. He's like, I smell a rat.
No, it is. It's amazing. Yeah, as you say, it's amazing to see. I think so many people will have had that realization through this period. But I mean, this is also what, like, I'm super grateful I have Bitcoin and also you, because you've been through this journey as well. And we've got lots of friends who also are like of this persuasion. But I imagine like getting red pilled in your and you don't have that community around you. Like imagine just being in the UK and all your friends and family are following the like government narrative, and you smell a rat, and you like, how do I even try to start going down this route? Like,
Yeah.
it's because it's not an easy journey.
Yeah.
And I mean, so going back to the Bournemouth guy, like what he was talking about is he was like, it is your responsibility to speak up when you see bullshit. Like, say the things, and speak loudly about it, because we need more voices to be able to show that we like not just going to be, be bullshitted. But then he was like, but draw the line. Like, don't isolate your loved ones. Like, don't lose it. He was speaking specifically after, like, I think he'd had an argument with his like mom and his auntie and stuff, who obviously were like super pro like vaccine mandates and stuff. And he obviously was like, no, but he was like, but then, you don't want to lose your relationships with your loved ones.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple of similar scenarios during this time, but ultimately, if you take it back to first principles, people who want to mandate vaccines, they might not feel this way, but what they are supporting is to giving up bodily autonomy. And effectively what they're saying to me is that, like, I don't believe that you should have the right to choose what goes into your own body, which makes me to some degree a slave. And I don't believe in slavery, and I would never think that that should happen to them. So it puts us on diametrically opposed positions, and like, it will destroy friendships, because like ultimately, do I want to be friends with someone who believes in slavery?
I mean,
and they don't think about it that way, but that is the fact of the matter. That's what it is. And when you break it to them in those uncertain terms, you're like, listen, we can't be mates, because actually, like,
you believe in slavery.
I'm anti-slavery and you're pro-slavery.
But this is when they just go, no, you're being extremist.
Yeah, you're being extremist.
And you're like, okay, but you haven't thought through your principled arguments.
Being principled, but this is what everyone, it always comes back to the gas chambers. This is what everyone thought. Everyone's like, oh, these Jews are just being extremists, like thinking they're going to end up in the gas chamber. And a lot of them left, right? They were like, fuck this, we're out of here, we can see the writing on the wall. Those that didn't, they were like, we never thought it would get to this.
Yeah.
And then it does. And it gets there one small, imperceptible step at a time.
Yeah.
And this is what really worries me. And like I've been having, like, not an existential crisis, but probably something closest to that I've ever come to in my life, where I'm like, can everyone else see what this is like? What's going on here? Like, this is terrifying me. Like, I see this like march of tyranny throughout society, and obviously, you live with me, and like you see, like it works me up sometimes, but like, it's very scary.
Yeah. But this is why I think a lot of people avoid it, right?
Yeah.
And I also just completely understand that. Like, I was having a conversation with another friend where we were like getting onto this topic, and he was like, actually, we were talking about you and the fact that you're like vocal and you're sharing about it. And he's like, I get it, I respect it. And he's like, but I just can't go down that hole. He's like, I get too depressed. It's too it's too deep. And like, I completely understand that. Like, it's not an easy journey.
No.
And you are going to end up isolating people, like what I'm following quite a lot of people in America who are basically having to quit their jobs because they don't want to get vaccinated, right? Yeah. And this is the sneaky way that they're doing it, right? Is you don't make it law. I mean, I know they tried to make it law, but like, it's not law, but you take away so much so that people are basically travel, their ability to work, like their ability to go out, socialize, all of that. You make it a social like faux pas not to be vaccinated, and then people don't want you at their house. Like literally, I mean, one of my friends told me she got vaccinated because her friends were having vaccine parties, and they were literally like joking, but also being like, "Are you vaccinated? Show us." Crazy.
Imagine we had an unvaccinated party. It would be like people would be like, "That's ridiculous. How can you do that?" Like,
yes, it would be so frowned upon.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But like, this is the thing. And so like, one of the things I'm really grateful for is that like, at no point have my friends and family pressurized me to make a decision either way. They've actually been really respectful of the fact that like, I'm making I think, and I say I think because I don't know this, because generally speaking, the topic's avoided because it's a difficult one. But my assumption is that a lot of them don't understand why I believe, like why I'm not.
Yeah.
Especially
they think you engaged an anti-vaxxer.
I mean, yes, but little do they know I am one too. Like, it's like, but I mean, but yeah, you're not getting both sides of the story in the UK. I mean, I
Yeah.
hope now more so, but like we're super exposed to it. Like
Yeah.
in South Africa, 25%, I mean, it's more than that now. It's like 30% vaccinated, right? But like, so therefore you've still got the majority of the country unvaccinated.
Yes.
And people will argue it's because they haven't had access or whatever, but like
Bullshit.
But I think, yeah, I think
They just don't want it.
they just don't want it. Like they're like, we're not scared of this very mild cold at this point. But also like, again, anyway, so there's way less pressure here, and that's what I've also enjoyed. Is I'm like, I don't think I see friends who didn't want to get vaccinated in the UK and then essentially were forced, like told by work,
Blackmail
you have to. And I just think that is the most hectic thing to go through, like to actually have someone put something in your body so that you can keep earning a living, but it's something that you don't believe in or you don't want. I can't imagine how like violating that feels.
It's like rape. It's a version of, it's a type of rape. Like,
it's horrendous.
Yeah, it's horrific.
But I'm like just so grateful that like that's not the position that we're in.
Yeah. And this is also where Bitcoin,
and people are being understanding.
This is where Bitcoin ties back into this, right? Because like they're blackmailing you with your job. So if you can escape to the decentralized world where you can work in a decentralized fashion and earn money in a decentralized fashion, then they don't have that power over you because they can't blackmail you with your job, because you're like, well, you can't stop me from earning because I'm just going to keep providing my services online and earn Bitcoin. And you can't shut down Bitcoin. So good luck to you. And you can live and this is why like freedom is so important and sovereignty is so important, because as soon as you don't have it, that's when you're going to miss it. Because people in the West have taken it for granted. And now they've had it taken away from them very quickly. And they've surrendered it. They've surrendered freedom for temporary security, and they're going to end up with neither, to paraphrase Benjamin Franklin. Like, because they don't have any security anymore, right? Because you don't have any protection from COVID. So your security's gone and you've given up your freedom. But what now?
Where does that leave you?
Yeah, where does that leave you? And to think that now things can just go back to normal and the governments won't abuse these rights again, like the laws don't get rolled back, you know? But so this is why
interesting to see what happens.
This is why Bitcoin is so important to me, because as someone who's of a dissident mindset, I know that sooner or later, if it keeps going this way, they'll come for me indirectly through my money or through my job or whatever. And then to have the options, the decentralized options are.
And I mean, they might not.
Hopefully not, yeah.
They might not.
Yeah.
But I understand that, like, going back to what we were talking about kind of near the beginning, like it's having that backup plan, right? It's preparing for a worst case scenario so that if it does happen, you know that you did everything that you could to protect yourself against it.
Yeah.
And I think that's I mean, it's also, I mean, I believe in Bitcoin in a much bigger sense than just for that. But for that, it definitely helps me sleep better at night, that I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, fiat currency fucks out. The network effect of Bitcoin is so great. And this is the other thing, right? Is like, going back to Bitcoin.
It's not a Bitcoin podcast at all.
But going back to Bitcoin and people talking about like, so again, talking to a friend who said, but like, what if when it all gets mined, there's only 2 million left to be mined. We go back to all of it gets mined. What if everyone gets bored and leaves? And I'm like, people? I mean, I was like, I don't even know how to approach this one. Like, I'm like,
I've never heard that
one. As in, I think the point being like, if that's coming at it from an investment point of view, right? It's like, it's only exciting as it's scaling like that, and it's the perception that once everything's mined, there'll be less excitement, so people will be less interested, so they'll invest less. I obviously would disagree. I think it's going to do the exact opposite, which I was like, I feel like I should try and explain this. I'm like, no, you should probably try and get in before it's all mined. Like, but the point being is like, what people don't realize is how intense the diehard Bitcoin maximalists are, right? Like that, like it goes deep. It goes like really deep. Like they believe it in their soul. And I'm like, if enough people believe in it, I mean, it's literally the only reason the fiat systems are still in existence is because enough people believe in them. Like people say this all the time, right? They're like, oh, money is just a concept. It's like, it is literally just a concept.
But people don't believe in fiat. They just use it. It's not like a belief. People believe in Bitcoin.
Yes.
People just use fiat. The thing is, when Bitcoin gets widely adopted, people will also just use it. They always
Yes,
believe it.
exactly,
It needs
exactly.
these early adopters
Yes,
to
you need that.
bootstrap
Yeah,
it.
but that's also why I have so much faith in it, right? Because I'm like, worst case scenario, like, you know, everyone else abandoned ship. I'm like, the people that I want to surround myself with are the people that believe in Bitcoin, because they're also freedom orientated, and they see the world for how it is, and they're trying to create something better. And I want to be in that camp. Put me there, please.
We'll take today as an example, right? So Bitcoin it's not just Bitcoin, right? So like we had the scenario where I bought some free range chickens off a friend of mine who's a Bitcoiner, who's like started raising free range chickens, because Bitcoin is like, it spills over, like the philosophy of Bitcoin spills over into the rest of your life. And it's like, okay, if the money is fake, and you want to get back to hard money, like what is that? What are the principles that make hard money good? And then like those principles start spilling over, and you're like, well, what is my food? What am I eating? Like, am I eating fiat sludge? Like, is
there fluoride in my water?
Is there fluoride? Well, yes. But I mean, am I just like noshing on sugar and carbs all day? Like, is that a good thing, or is that the like fiat equivalent of just quantitative easing? You know?
Yes.
And it's built in like next minute. Like,
no, I mean, it's a lifestyle. It is a religion.
It's totally a religion. But surrounding yourself with those people, it's kind of what you want in the apocalypse.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's that, I mean, again, it's the like self-responsibility and the individualism that I'm like, I 100% respect the full vast spectrum of belief systems that people have. And mine is that the best way to run a successful society is like starting with the individual, and individuals taking responsibility for their life and not relying on external things. And so, and like, obviously that goes back to government. And so I'm like, Bitcoin is perfect for that. And so, yeah, I want to be in that society, please. And thank you.
Well, you're there already. Tell me, which philosopher has, I don't want to say female philosopher because that's sexist, but which philosopher has inspired you the most, whose like thoughts you have taken the most from?
I think probably John Locke, which is interesting because when I was at university, I remember thinking like, no, not a fan, but
not this racist.
But yeah.
Good. Okay. And the next one, if there was anyone you could orange pill, who would it be?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Just one person.
Well, I mean, yeah, let's keep it simple.
Is this on the... No, I've got some follow-up questions. Is this... Okay. Oh, no, this is so hard.
Okay, put it this way. So there's not a lot of women in the Bitcoin space. If you could orange pill one female, who do you think would be a powerful or like good voice for to get Bitcoin out there amongst other women?
Because it's such a hard question.
Yeah, because it's like we need more female. Fuck, I sound like an NPC. We need more female voices in Bitcoin. We don't need it, but like it will add to the diversity, and you know.
Yeah,
probably...
but this is the thing. I mean, because I also find this an interesting discussion, right? Because like I work in female empowerment, and I understand how much representation impacts things.
Yeah,
like it does. Like I think of so many podcasts I listen to. I'm listening to men, and I'm like, God, I would just love to, like, you do have that, like, because then you can relate so much harder. And I also believe that, like, the way you share information is different. Like, it is different. And I tested my theory on a teacher recently, and she, like, was having none of it, because I was convinced that men, and obviously, again, this is a spectrum, so this is very generalized, but, like, men learn in a certain way, and therefore, like, when they share information, they share it in a certain way. And the reason I think this is because I'm like, I mean, it's very personal experience, but like very anecdotal stuff. But I'm like, you see the way, like when guys get together, the way that they chat and the topics that they talk about is so different to what women talk about. Yes. And I'm like, we are living, I mean, you could go down the whole, like, we're still on the equal route, and in specific areas, fine. But like predominantly in Western society, a group of women can talk about any topic they want. Yeah. Any topic.
Without worrying about being stoned.
Without worrying about being stoned.
Unless they're smoking weed, in which case they will be stoned.
Yes, fair.
Yes.
obviously.
Depends on the weed, I suppose. But yeah, they have that freedom because they can't.
Right?
You
Yes.
can't do that in Saudi Arabia.
Yes. No, exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, now they're still not talking about the same topics as men.
No.
Right?
No.
They're just not. And like, there's the whole like girls' night, lads' night. It's a very different vibe.
Yes.
Men and women are different.
Yes. Is that
There,
what
I said it.
We're getting to it. Good. I'm glad we've.
But and so
that.
therefore I'm like, and the reason I'm saying this is because obviously we went to this conference recently, and a lot of the speakers were male, and I was thinking, me trying to understand the information. I mean, it's like very intelligent, super technical stuff. So like, I understand it was always going to be like me. It was going to be a big learning curve for me. But at the same time, I was like, I know that a female presenter would present this information very differently, and that is anyway. So going back to your question about who would I orange pill, I'm like, I think it's important because I'm like, I think you do need female voices because I think they present the information differently and in a way that is more accessible for women, and therefore I think it's a very good question. And no, but my thing is like
which red pilled female is out there that'll have be able to have the most effect if she comes across into Bitcoin to bring her audience across? You know, or at least you think will spread has the right philosophy.
Yeah.
To spread this, and who's been so good on like straight, who's been sticking to their principles, because you don't want fair weather Bitcoiners because they just end up being shitcoiners, and then next minute they're saying Craig writes Satoshi. You can't have that.
Yeah. Okay, but like I just want to say Candace Owens.
Ramon wouldn't like that.
I know he wouldn't.
Ramon thinks Candace is a grifter.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't think she's a grifter either. Oh, well, I don't think she's a grifter.
Yeah.
I like her.
Yeah.
She's good.
But also part of his argument for why she's a grifter is because she moves sides, and I'm like, but I personally think that that's fine. Like, like I also move sides. Like people do, you like.
She was like, "Oh, this makes sense. I'm gonna go there now.
Let me run." This
nothing wrong
sense.
with that.
And then she made a lot of money out of it. Good. I hope she's buying Bitcoin with it.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, this question is so hard because my only issue, I think Candace Owens is brilliant in a lot of ways. And I think that the reason I would say her is because I think she has a big voice, and she's not afraid to use it at all. And she has like a very big following, and she's got some very good platforms.
Yeah.
And I think that she could do a lot of good if she was orange pilled.
Candy, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. No, I reckon she's good. And then what do you think for other Bitcoin wives out there and Bitcoin spouses? Like, how would you suggest that they kind of, I wouldn't say get into Bitcoin because they're surrounded by like, and we see it, like we've got friends who, I've got a bunch of Bitcoin friends, and the wives and girlfriends are like there.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think we get them more on board?
I think you need to find the area, like Bitcoin it's not just this one thing. Like there's so many aspects to it. So I'm like, find the area of it that interests you and understand that well. Like obviously we've been talking, like for me, it's the philosophy. It's very much the why. And like that I find fascinating, and I can be like endlessly entertained by that. I can do all of the, I can go down that rabbit hole very happily. The technical side, I'm like, I realize that I need to understand a certain amount of it to be able to understand the why as well. But I'm also happy to just keep that door like ajar, you know? And I think, so I mean, my advice would definitely just be like, find the area and try and tap into, try and learn more about the different areas of Bitcoin and see if there's one that tickles your fancy. But
it's kind of like find that ill in society that pisses you off. Find the thing that injustice that makes you angry.
Yes.
And then speak to someone who's into Bitcoin about it, and maybe
and
they can be like, how Bitcoin fixes this.
Because that's such a good point. Yeah.
Because I mean, I kind of follow the maximum fix the money, fix the world. Because I trace not every, but the majority of evils we see in the world today back to the fact that there's one group of people who can print money for free and use that money to steal everyone else's energy.
Yeah.
And if you take that right, that privilege away from them, that evens the playing field, and you have a much more honest society.
Yeah. And
then that honest society permeates through everything, to our consumer culture, to like the way we pollute, like it changes the way we interact with our ecosystem. And I think it's much better for the environment, for humanity, for our long-term thinking,
Yes.
instead of these crazy short-term cycles we think in. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, find the thing that triggers you, and then figure out how Bitcoin fixes that, and that'll kind of
Yeah.
set you on the path.
Yeah.
For you, was
Nice.
it Nigel Farage?
It was what I was talking to the other day. They were slamming him.
Nigel,
Nigel.
he's fucking good though.
I don't know enough.
Yeah, fair. I thought I told you all those years ago. Nigel's the man.
I mean, you did, but I haven't looked into it any further. So I would just be blindly believing you, and I don't want to I don't want to be sitting here doing that.
Yeah, don't trust, verify. Okay, I think we're gonna wrap it there.
Nice.
Go to bed. Where can people? Do you want to make your socials available that people can track you down, or not really?
Yeah.
Do you want to?
No, I mean, by all means.
Okay, cool. Where can people find you?
Probably like just Instagram and LinkedIn are the two places.
Cool.
I hang out. I don't really hang out on LinkedIn though.
No one really does. LinkedIn's weird.
Some people do, but it's the weirdos.
Yeah, it's the aspirant lizards who hang out there. Oh, did you see Harry and Meghan had a child, by the way?
Yeah.
That picture of them holding the iguana.
I didn't see that.
They popped it out real fast.
Yeah. On our family WhatsApp group.
On that bombshell. Cool. Oh, what's your handle on Instagram?
I don't know. Flora Fontes?
There we go. Flora, Flora. Like the margarine.
Yeah, Fontes.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's literally just that.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That was amazing. Cool. Good night, everyone.